Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning for our session with Nick Francis and Andy Hodges of Decathlon. I'm just going to give it another couple of minutes for anybody who may be running a little bit late. So if I could ask you just to bear with me for another couple of minutes and we will get things underway. Thank you. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out to join us this morning. Great to see so many participants on the call this morning. As I said at the beginning of the call, just a big thank you for everyone to taking the time out for joining us this morning. This morning's session is with our good friends at Decathlon. It's on the topic of choosing the right path for digital HR and payroll transformation. Delighted to be joined by Nick Francis, Payroll Manager at Decathlon, but also my colleague Andy Hodges, Managing Director for the UK and Ireland. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into this morning's session. This morning's session will be recorded, and please feel free to reach out to either myself or any of the participants after the call if you would like a copy of the session. It's more than something that we're happy to provide. We'll also provide the slides. Also, for those of you who have been on these sessions before, we try to make them, I suppose, as interactive and as engaging as possible. You'll notice on the right-hand side of your panel, just at the bottom, there's a questions tab. So if you do have questions during the course of the session, please feel free to submit them. We will do a questions and answer session at the end. We have also put an agenda in place. I think it's important to note that this morning's piece is going to be very conversational. I am going to do my best to moderate it, but during the course of the session, we'll start off with some introductions. We'll talk a little bit about Decathlon, a little bit about Gavdi Group. Nick will take some questions on building a case for HR transformation. We'll talk about choosing the right technology, I suppose the importance of selecting the right partner, and Nick will then summarize with some key takeaways, I suppose, from his experience of going through this journey. As I said already, we'll also take some questions and answers. We may go off agenda from time to time, but that's absolutely fine. So listen, I'm just conscious of the time, quite anxious to get things underway. I'm going to start off with some introductions. I'm going to start from a Gavdi perspective. Good morning, Andy. How are you?
Good morning, John. Very well, thank you. Very good.
Andy, it'd be great if you could maybe introduce yourself, tell our audience this morning who you are, what you do, and maybe for how long you're doing it, and maybe then tell them a little bit about Gavdi Group and what we do as an organisation. I think that'd be a really good starting point, and I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, John. Yes, good morning, everybody, and welcome to this what would tend to be a dialogue. I was tempted, because Nick and I are from the same part of London, I was tempted to ask John to put some subtitles up, because we're going to go into that South London dialect, I feel, at some point, but if I haven't already fallen into the trap. But yeah, good morning and welcome. I'm, as John said, the Managing Director for the UK and Ireland businesses. I also run the sales and marketing for Gavdi Group. And I'm very much hands-on with regards to our customers in the UK and other parts of the group. And yeah, started working with Nick from the word go, really. I think we created a partnership with Decathlon and our colleagues at SAP, particularly Tony Keogh at SAP, in terms of a very open and honest dialogue, and hopefully that's going to come across in the meeting today. Just to very briefly, and I think if you want to learn about us as a company, you can go to our website and find out everything you can, so I'm not going to bore you with the Gavdi group. We are a group of countries working with the Gavdi group. I think we have 11 country operations in the Gavdi group, around about 286 people, and really a key focus on workforce management solutions, particularly around SAP SuccessFactors and obviously ServiceNow as well as a particular service line, and everything that goes around that. We have third-party relationships as well. And one of those relationships with Kronos was part and parcel of the delivery that we did with Decathlon. I'm sure Nick will talk about that one as well. But yes, we're a privately owned organisation, and one of the things about what we do for a living is it's about customer advocacy. It's the adages. I think the motto we have is to sell what we can deliver and deliver what we sell. It's really, really important that you pop out the other end of that. And having got into the sales process with the customer, is they end up at the end delighted with what they've got, and they've got exactly, if not a little bit more, than they signed up for. And that's really important for us to grow as a company and to work with folk like Decathlon and them to become advocates for us. So that's me, and that's Gavdi. Thank you, John. You're on mute, John, I think. There you go.
Excuse me. Good morning, Nick. Great to have you on the call this morning. Really good. I think for our audience, if maybe you could maybe outline a little bit about yourself, I suppose, a little bit of background. Who is Nick Francis? And I suppose more importantly, for those, and I think there's very few on the call this morning that aren't familiar with who Decathlon are, but it'd be great to hear a little bit more about Decathlon, and we can get into the session then. So yeah, thanks for your time, Nick.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, John and Andy, for inviting me along to this in the first place. And welcome everyone to the session. I'm Nick. I've been doing payroll for my sins for 18 odd years now. Worked at some big firms, Inditex, Expedia, Accenture. Joined Decathlon about 3.5 years ago. Love the company, but there was a lot of things to fix, as we'll go into later. So me in a nutshell, been doing it a long time, never escaped payroll, probably never will. So that's my work history. In terms of Decathlon, we are actually the world's largest sports goods retailer. Our presence in the UK has not always been as huge as other European countries, but in terms of United level, we're in 65 countries now. I think we've got about 1,800 stores globally. I think nearly 100,000 staff. So global presence is large. UK presence wasn't always so big. In recent years, it has taken a much bigger boost, and which was one of the driving reasons behind the changes we made.
Great. Thanks for that, Nick. I mean, a very good starting point is, and I'm going to tee Andy up maybe to start the discussion with this, but I think it's fair to say that, this isn't a relationship that was built overnight. This has really been a long-term relationship. It's something that I know that it's at least 18 months, I would imagine, since Andy had the very first call with Nick. And
it was longer, John.
Was it
we
really?
we got interrupted by COVID, didn't we?
Yeah.
We were well on the way to finalising everything. We've been through a whole process of evaluation and discussions and meetings and workshops. And just as Decathlon were about to push the button, COVID came along and we went into lockdown. So that was a real shock, wasn't it? Yeah.
So maybe, sorry, Andy, not to cut across you, but maybe a good starting point would be, Nick, maybe just to outline you know, where you were and when you had that realization that, I suppose, firstly, we need to look at building a case for HR transformation with the board, and I suppose also, more importantly, when you did realize that, you know, we do have difficulties that need to be addressed. I think that might be a very good starting point for the audience, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, as I said, I joined Decathlon about 3.5 years ago. I've worked at some quite big firms prior to that, and Intertech's obviously huge in the retail market as well. And I'd seen a lot of good things, a lot of automations that have been put in place, a lot of really strong processes. I was kind of used to that in my career. I kind of felt maybe I was a little bit spoiled with how far progressed some of the teams I joined in the past were. And when I joined Decathlon, I knew the company. You know, I had a long history myself with the company in terms of purchases, especially when I've been on holiday. So I was really, really pleased to join the company. However, from pretty much the first week I joined, I realised it was going to be a bit of a job on my hands. Pretty much start to finish with a manual process. We had systems in place, but they were very clunky. Everything was a manual import and export process. Everything was hands-on from the minute someone joined and the manager had to build a schedule or enter any personal details, right through to payment, that person leaving. So the entire life cycle of an employee was dealt with completely manually, which in this day and age is just an unnecessary risk. You know, the technology is out there from many different providers. So I knew straight away that something needed to be done. Obviously, I'd literally just joined, so I wanted to get my feet under the table before I started telling them they had to invest X amount of money on me. So it was always in the background. And luckily enough, our CFO joined the UK operation from France about 3 months before I did, and he's had similar experience in external organisations. So we were very much on a similar level. We knew that for the UK to progress and continue its growth, we needed some kind of back office support to support that. However, as I said, I was fresh in the company, had no previous experience in Decathlon, so I don't blame them for being a bit loath to suddenly hand me a blank checkbook to go and overhaul everything. So there was a process behind it. I started small. I introduced a benefits platform, which was a smaller project. That went very well. We got return of investment in the first year, which helped my case in the long run. And then just gathered evidence. You know, you can't just jump both feet into this kind of thing, unfortunately. I think everyone would like to have see the problem and have a solution the next day. You know, that'd be everyone's ideal world. But it was very much in my mind, gathering evidence, assessing the situation, seeing what processes do work but could be improved, seeing what processes we just needed to bin, where the risks were, because, you know, with the introduction of GDPR, there was huge pressure on additional risks and potential fines that came from those them investigations. And, you know, every employee was freely available to make a report on us if they so chose. So the risk was real. And then I think one of the main points during the business case actually was, I believe it was British Airways, got a huge fine at the time. And I've done a comparison between the kind of processes that we were operating and what BA got fined on. And, you know, our operation is not as big in the UK, so, you know, the fines would have been smaller, but proportionally would have been hugely damaging to the UK. So there was this whole build-up to the business case. I knew it needed to happen at some point, so I spent probably about a year, 14 months building up the case in my head before I even actually had the conversations with any providers. So you know, I was prepared for it, even though I didn't know it was going to happen.
Nick, one of the things that I mean, up front, you said, payroll, and, you know, I'll be doing payroll till, you know, I drop, sort of thing. But one of the things that I noticed straight off the bat when we first started to discuss this, and I think it came from a referral from another customer of ours as well, one of your suppliers. And one of the things about it was you were very much in payroll, right? That was a given, but you also took on core HR and also talent management. You didn't kind of try to bring other people in to do. You managed the whole thing, and I was really quite impressed with that. And the fact you took it all on, not just payroll.
Yeah, well, a little quirk of the way Decathlon was set up at the time is we didn't really have a HR team. It was kind of just dumped on the payroll team a little bit. So being responsible employees that we were, we always just managed it. You know, we've got a much better setup now. We're in a much stronger position. We've got a HR team. We've got that support for those kind of processes. But at the time and during the project, you know, we were very much flying solo. We were dealing with the entire, let's say, employee life cycle, the recruitment phase, onboarding, you know, employee management throughout their time in the company, the leaving process, asset recovery, disciplinaries.
The whole, yes, I know you did the hire to retire thing. One of the things it was that we were dealing with some of the regulatory things, because that was something that you brought up often and early. But the other thing is that you were talking about the colleague experience as well, your colleagues in the stores, and how important it was. I mean, one of the key things that we had to really focus on was the impact on your brand. Decathlon's got a fantastic brand in the market, and the protection and enhancement of that was something that we really focused on. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, about the colleague experience focus as much as it was about the practical regulation.
Yeah, and I think especially in retail, it's really important that you minimise the amount of impact that these systems and tools and processes have on the frontline staffs. That, you know, we want them to enjoy using it, but also spend the minimal amount of time using them. You know, for us, we spend every day in there. That's our bread and butter. You know, we want it to be an enjoyable experience, but more so for us, we need it to do what we need it to do. You know, it doesn't necessarily need to be a lovely UI and a comfortable experience and you know, and quick and efficient from a general employee point of view. But to get that engagement, you need people to want to use it and to right, they might not get excited about using it, but you know, there needs to be a lack of negativity. If there's not excitement, you know, if there's no negativity, for me, that's excitement. You know, so. And
I think one of the things in the stores as well, I think we will get onto this in a while. As John said, we're going to go a little bit off piece, was the whole idea of it being available on a smartphone or a tablet, right? Because not everyone's sitting in front of a laptop in a store when they're walking around helping or working in that environment. So I think that ready access via smartphones and tablets was also quite key, as I recall it anyway, mate.
Yeah, and it's been one of the strongest pieces of feedback from the general populace, is just the ease of kind of, you know, punching in and out on their phone, not needing to tap out with their passes at a particular point. They can just do it on their phones, accessing their holidays all the time, you know, seeing the available balances, being able to just download their work schedule onto their phone and it applies to their calendar. You know, it's simple things that actually make people's lives that little bit easier. You know, not many people want to work. You know, not many people are going to come into the office or to the store for the love of just coming there. So, you know, we need to make their experiences as simple and as pleasant as possible for something that they have to do. And the feedback has been very, very good. You know, we also moved into a position where we were kind of phasing out things like laptops at stores, especially. I hate this word, but we were introducing things called phablets, somewhere between a tablet and a phone. You know, I don't know if other companies use that, but I hate it. But it kind of explains it. It's the size of it and the functionality is somewhere between a tablet and a phone. So.
Let me take you back before John chimes in and moderates us. Let me take you back, because one of the things I recall in our first conversation, and I do remember us having, you know, when you approached, you had a particular business needs that had to be fulfilled, which you've already spoken about. Well, one of the things I recognised and I noticed straight away was we brought in Tony from SAP, and I think between the three of us, there was a meeting of minds, and there was a real key objective. And I think as well, Mike Esau from SAP as well helped with a business case, and it helped you build that whole business case and the proposition. It was a very strong case, by the way. I remember reading it, and we incorporated it into the whole approach. But I do recall that whole three-way partnership worked really, really well, certainly from my perspective. But how did, what was your experience of that? How did you find that partnership worked for you?
I mean, to be honest, it was those early conversations that kind of sold not SuccessFactors from Tony's point of view and Gavdi from yours, Andy. It was very much as you said, a meeting of minds, similar mindsets. We investigated other companies, and even though you go to SAP's offices and they're it's kind of like going into a spaceship, and
Sure.
It's very corporate, which is not quite the Decathlon way. We are quite an easygoing culture. I'm wearing a shirt today, but generally you can come in wearing your sports equipment and no one bat an eyelid.
I've been modelled by John, in fact.
We've got a very easygoing culture, and we needed a company that understood that and could kind of walk side by side with us, and not try and be overbearing in terms of the corporate side of things, and really meet us in the middle somewhere. And we got that from the moment we met Tony, from when we met Michael, from when we met you guys. Often people say they get a feeling, and sometimes you do have to follow that gut instinct. And the first feeling we got from meeting Tony and Michael was great, and it didn't feel like a corporate sales pitch, which was really important to us. It felt like a brainstorming session to see whether we could match. And then it was a similar feel for you guys. We came in, it was very relaxed. We had easy flow of conversation. But then the important topics, can you actually do what we need you to do? It was there. The substance was there, but the cultural match was there as well. So it was very easy because we had a similar mindset and personalities.
Just across, sorry, Andy, sorry, Nick.
Yes, go on, John.
Just going to keep you on time points. I think that is a very good segue into the next thing I think we'd like to discuss, really, or get a better understanding, is just the technology and SAP SuccessFactors as total workforce management solution. Let's say, as you've often referenced, hire to retire, Nick. So just curious to hear a little bit more about what you liked about SAP SuccessFactors. I imagine you probably looked at other vendors, but I suppose ultimately...
Well, John, the interesting thing about that was from the word go, when we got engaged with Decathlon, we like every other SAP SuccessFactors partner, let's be honest about it, has our own package solutions, right? We have our own pre-built content. It's an accelerator in old money, or it helps move the project forward because it's based on 80% of the implementations we do has standard config that we've set up. Well, one of the things we did is we went into this kind of demo environment. So Nick got exposed to our experts very early in the process. It wasn't, I tend not to sell. It's more of engagement, as Nick said, but we bring the experts in and we did a demo, and we were demoing that stuff up front, weren't we? So it was a combination, if you like, of, it seems, the native best practice of SuccessFactors, combined with some of our package solution content, which you got to see straight away. But Nick, what was your thoughts around that?
We were actually in a reasonably good situation for this kind of project because we were so process light and we were so manual. We didn't really have to shoehorn in too many of our existing practices. And I personally, I've worked with SuccessFactors before, and the HCM on site as well. So I knew SAP had the functionality and the technology to achieve what we needed to achieve. So that was really never in question. It was how we can adapt that to where we are now and leave room to expand for the future. That was the whole point of this project in the first place, was to get us to a point where, as a company, we were released on a par with our peers, with our competitors in terms of the back office function. but leave ourselves enough room to expand and really chase those huge growths that we're looking for in the next 5 to 10 years. So the technology.
You really bought into it. I'm sorry, Nick. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, I was going to say actually. So it was more interesting to see your package solution at the time, because that really, as you said, gave us the head start on the projects that we wanted, especially in the time frame that we had.
The time frames, oh my God, but the worst thing ever is to be given a go live date before you've even really figured out what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, because that I don't know about you, but I might have, I'm being like the swan, on the graceful on top of the river, and then underneath the little legs to go like this, because when we got that go live date, so we had to go live by the August, and the bill of materials was core HR, employee central payroll for the UK, Kronos, and recruitment and onboarding all had to go live within 8 months, and we didn't even start till January. Yeah, and I had to go lying down in a dark room for a little while after your CFO said that's what you're going to do.
I told you before, didn't I? The PM that we hired in to the carpet, Alistair, he just laughed.
Alistair, yeah.
When he asked what was invented and how soon, he did laugh, and he just, okay, we'll try. But we did it successfully in the end, so that's great. I'm just winding it back to the package solution. For us, it was the perfect solution, because we, as you like to say in the build up, we was a green field. We didn't have existing processes that we needed to overlap over yours or kind of, as I said earlier, shoehorn into the GPS. We could really literally start at the ground up for pretty much everything, other than some of the statutory kind of costs.
The payroll with a little bit more definition, didn't it? Of course, the payroll side of things.
Could I just again, just to interact, just Andy, would you mind maybe outlining to maybe members of the audience this morning that aren't familiar, what does a package solution look like? We're talking about GPS. From your perspective, what is a package solution, or what are the best practices and so forth?
Yeah, just to really make it as simplistic as I could possibly make it. So over 10 years that we've been doing SuccessFactors, right, there's a certain amount of configuration which is fairly standard. It doesn't come out of the box, but 80%, if not more, of clients ask for the same thing over and over again. So over the 10 years, we developed the concept of saying, well, let's package these solutions up in pre-configured content, which you can copy across. And it does require green field. That's why there's another thing about the green field, which I'm going to mention as well about Nick and his team. But it's about that technology for the moment is, so there's a standard amount of, so you can really speed up the project by saying, well, that's common config. Let's just copy that across to the client instance and start with that.
Okay.
So you're starting with iteration one, almost the iteration one of the solution, and it really accelerates the project and makes you go faster. So it's almost like in the workshops, you're not doing business requirement workshops, you're doing confirmation workshops. You're confirming that that's the scope of what they're going to get, and then you allow them to tweak it. It just accelerates things faster, and you're spending more time on the user acceptance testing, which tends to be the sort of the banana skin, if you like, of projects. Typically, it's not typically in the build; it's in the UAT side of things, as Nick's confirming by smiling. But there's a thing around this whole package solution approach, which if you don't have in place, it will never work. And one of the great things about Nick and his team, and I'll just highlight Hannah and Carlos as two members of the team, they had a mindset of, they had an open mind about it. They were willing to accept through the demonstration. So we had to show them, they were willing to accept through the demonstration that this was a best practice solution and it would work for them. It was a green field, so we were starting from a point of them adopting these best practices. With issues around things like Kronos, EC and EC Payroll, there is a little bit more to it than just sort of a pre-configured solution. There's a little bit more involved because of the regulatory issues and because payroll has specific wage charts, etc. And I'll stop there because that's as much as I know to be dangerous about payroll. But the whole idea was that they adopted it. They had that mindset of, let's take it all on board. Let's go with this because we've got nothing in place right now apart from manual processes, and it's a chance for us to readdress this and put these processes in place. So the combination of the package solution combined with their mindset meant that this project was deemed to succeed and not to fail, in my opinion.
So then I suppose back to you, Nick. I mean, in the sense that I suppose you're really taking the partner in as the expert and as the trusted advisor. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely, and you've got to rely on their knowledge and their experience to get you through, especially some very tough times. You know, it's not always going to be sweetness and light. There will be very tough moments. And one thing I always come back to is, and you mentioned it about us, but we say the same about you. There was a very pragmatic approach to the project as a whole. When we hit hurdles, we put our heads together and we figured a way around it. You know, and that was good for both parties. You know, as I said, we were in a quite lucky position in terms of we didn't really have to replace too many processes. We were taking processes away from people's hands, you know, within the team. So we had that flexibility to choose our own path and to follow the pathways that you laid down for us.
Sure.
So, you know, we were in a very privileged situation. Not every company is going to be in that. You know, they will have very, very kind of set in stone processes, procedures that need to be bespoke into the system. But again, even that, the GPS could handle that. You know, we have some quirks. You know, I think as every payroll department in the world probably does. There's one or two little things that Decathlon does differently from other companies I've worked in. But again, when you're kind of packaging up 80%, that 20% you can spend the time to investigate, to dig in, to really investigate why. Do you still need to do it? And if so, how do we get that into the tool with all the other package processes? So it worked perfectly for us. You know, I think we're in other than time frame, you know, we were probably one of the you know, a perfect partner for you guys, because you could impart all of your experience and your best practices to us, and you know, we only really had that 20% to bespoke anyway. So it was a real kind of merging of a perfect relationship, really. You know,
it was. We had I think the thing about it is the openness and transparency across all the three different parties about what was going to happen and when it was going to happen and how it was going to happen. And you're right. I think the success of the project was also underlined by the fact that it's how you deal with the challenges, not necessarily about how you deal with the things that go well. It's how you deal with the challenges that come up. And one of the juggling aspects of this is having a clearly defined scope of what we're going to deliver. Now, luckily, you've been in the consultancy business yourself, so you kind of knew what we were trying to achieve, and you knew by looking at that proposal what you were going to get, because we did the demos as well, and we did the workshops, and you knew exactly what you were going to get. And then oftentimes the team would come to me, whether it be your PM, Alistair, or one of my team coming to me and say, oh, Decathlon want to do this, and it isn't necessarily, and we balanced off the commercial constraints, because you know, we went into quite a big, you remember that Friday afternoon meeting? I remember it with Alberto, and I think our CEO Soren came into it as well. Was a really intense discussion about what wasn't going to happen at what price. That was interesting. So we managed the statement of work really closely, but then every now and again you've got to, you know, tweak a little bit. You've got to allow a little bit of flexibility, otherwise you can't make it your own. So that was one of the big challenges. But I think between yourself and Alistair particularly, I think you did a really good job of managing us as your partner. And you know, I often looked at things and said, okay, well that's a reasonable request, because you can't have every single thing down in as much as you like to. You can't have everything down, and you needed that sort of degree of flexibility. So, but again, it's how we met those challenges for me commercially. Forget the project for the moment, but commercially was how we met those challenges, and your ability to be able to evaluate and say, yeah, do you know what, actually that's a change request. We put our hands up to that. It's a change request. We know we're changing things, so that's okay, and we manage things that way. Again, it's that openness and honesty which really made it a successful project for you and for us and for SAP, of course, no doubt.
Yeah, and it's probably one of the things I would say is one of the most important things is getting that partner right. You know, I'll give Tony a hell of a lot of credit for putting us in contact, because it worked, and there's a lot of cultural similarities between the two companies, the way we operate, our kind of company vision, the way we want to treat our staff, etc. So there's a lot of kind of similarities there, and it worked well. And as you said, I think you see the value of a relationship when the times are hard, not so much, as you say, when the sun's shining. And there were some very difficult conversations we had to have, especially, I keep coming back to it, the time frame that we had and the resources that we had available. There were some very complicated, difficult conversations to have at times, but we had them, and it was very cordial and it was very professional. And 99.9% of the time we came out with a solution that was good for both parties. So that honesty and openness, I think, is super important. I'll tell you straight up what I think, and you've done the same.
And that brings us really, sorry, Andy, that brings us really nicely on to the next topic that I want to cover. I was just trying to stick to the agenda with the two of you guys. Is about choosing the right partner. And Nick, you talk about relationships and so forth, and I suppose we talk about how critical it is, but a question from you to you, Andy, let's say, just to kick things off from a partner perspective. I mean, how important is it to you, I suppose, having that kind of relationship with the customer? And another question, and this is a really good question from a member of the audience, in the sense is, how do you feel as a partner when you have a customer like Decathlon approach you and they want to embark on this quite significant transformation journey?
I think the reality of it is that when you first meet with a customer or a prospective customer of the organization, first of all, you've got to figure out what they need. And the second thing you have to figure out is, can we deliver what they need, and are we the right partner for them? And they're evaluating us as much as we're evaluating them, because we are a certain type of organization and we work in a certain way. So I think there's a dual evaluation for that. But I think that the openness and transparency is really key. Not every relationship is like this. Nick and I have a pretty informal relationship, if you like, based on mutual respect and trust and all the other things that go around that. And we have a lot of camaraderie. Same with Tony as well, and that's how that all worked out. But you have different relationships with different customers. I mean, I think one of the key things for me is, on this journey, is we provided the managed service to Decathlon. They bought the managed service from Gavdi. So they bought not just the SAP subscriptions from us, we implemented, and we're now supporting them for the next 3 to 4 years. With partners, and we are in consulting terms, if it's just a horrible phrase, but it's the true one, is that it's the one neck to choke thing, where we're responsible for the whole of their HR and payroll landscape.
Sure.
We're on, because it's a managed service, and they trusted us with that. And I know we have, because Nick would have been calling me off the hook by now, but we've actually met our obligations with regard to that managed service, because that partnership works really, really well. And Nick, I know full well that if that wasn't the case, Nick and Alberto, his CFO, will be on the phone to me on a daily basis. But fortunately for me, touch wood, they aren't, because that partnership works really well. And when we do meet those hurdles, and of course you do, ongoing in a partnership like that, we deal with them. But that trust by them in us was actually a huge compliment to the Gavdi organisation, I think, in the way that we do business.
Yeah, great answer, Nick. I suppose from a cultural fit, Andy talks about partnership relationships, communication. It seems to be something that is very much to the core. And I suppose having those kind of personal relationships, how important was that to you and your colleagues? I mean, I guess it's also important to realize it wasn't just Nick Francis that implemented this successful project, that he had a team, and a really, really good team behind him. And, I mean, what did that look like to you? How important was it, not alone to you, but maybe other members of your team and so forth?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I was the main decision maker from my team, but I like to run a democracy and not a dictatorship. So, it was really important for me that they bought into it as well. They were going to be huge stakeholders in that process, and they were, and they worked some, seriously long, hard hours to get us to where we are. So kudos to my guys in not only my payroll team but in the wider project team, because we had limited resources to do quite an intense task. So we knew it was going to be hard work. We knew we wasn't going to have hundreds of resources to kind of just put their whole time on this project. We had to manage our day-to-day as well. So having that strong relationship, not just between myself and Andy, but between both teams, and being able, everyone being comfortable to have those conversations individually, not have to go through the PM, not have to come to me or go to Andy. People could link up and converse and talk through problems, depending on where the resources were available. It was really important, and I think it was probably within about half an hour of the first meeting, it was so comfortable. We'd had a bit of a laugh, but we'd also spoken about the important topics that we wanted to tackle through this project. So I think we all, me, myself, and all of my team came out of the first meeting with Andy, and I think was you there, John? I think you was there.
Yeah, would have been, yeah.
At Clock House, yeah. And we were all really happy. We were all just like, this feels right, this feels great. We all had the same gut instinct that relationship could work. Obviously, you're taking a bit of faith. You guys had a bit of a faith for that meeting, but it felt very genuine. And one of the important things for me is that if you couldn't do something, you said no. You didn't try and BS and say, we'll take it away. We might be able to build something for this. If it wasn't really feasible, you were very honest with us straight away. I think that's going to happen. And other vendors that we had actually spoken to never really wanted to give a negative answer. And sometimes a negative answer can be a positive, because Absolutely. You get that genuine feedback. So the relationship the whole way through has been one of the most important aspects of it. I would say. Yeah.
Guys, just to keep us honest again and just on time, just conscious we've got 15 minutes left. There's quite a few questions. I'm just going to end up maybe this section of this morning's presentation, and not to put too much pressure on either of you. If we were to look at maybe 5 key takeaways from the project at Decathlon, and I think it's also important to stress the fact that it's been a very, very successful project. There's been multiple go lives and so forth. If I was to start maybe with you, Andy, if that was all right, in hindsight, when you look back, if you were to give maybe some words of advice or words of wisdom to our audience, let's maybe start if you had maybe, your key takeaway from what you've experienced.
I think with the experience of deploying SuccessFactors, and prior to that, I did SAP HR for a living. So I think one of the key things about SuccessFactors and cloud solutions generally is that don't look at go live as a destination anymore. It's part of the journey. You're in that journey for a period of time. With us, it's 5 years plus, I suspect, and you're going to go on a journey, and that system's going to develop. So, for instance, Decathlon get the benefits of our release management services, where we talk through some of the upgrades that SAP does on a regular basis. And, it's part of a journey. So, whereas before we used to sort of look at go live as a destination and everything had to be in for go live, is look at it as just a transformational journey, part of that journey. So you might not get 100% of everything straight away on go live, but if you go with a plan and look at it as part of a journey, you will evolve into that solution, and really don't try to customize it. Try and adapt your processes as much as you possibly can to fit what we call the cloud paradigm, like that whole thing of going with the best practices like Decathlon did, and trusting that process, and then evolving processes internally, and look more of it as a transformational program, and working with the business to benefit from the best practices that solutions like SuccessFactors and our package solutions bring to the party. But that would be my thing, as well as learn from Decathlon, that open mind. I promise you, as Nick said, the team of people that they engaged and the way that our consultants approached it, the experts who went out there to do this project, they just had a really open mind, and they had that kind of collegiate, that project team really came together as a team. It wasn't sort of Decathlon and Gavdi, it was a project team that had the same objective that they needed to meet, and that's why I think it all came together and went live. But that's my own thoughts. Thank you, John.
Andy, over to you, Nick.
So yeah, I mean, I've got a few
yeah, fine,
points.
Yeah.
Obviously, most people will need a sponsor internally. We agreed with our sponsor to implement within 6 to 8 months. We achieved it at the expense of our personal lives a lot of the time. So if you're engaging on this kind of journey, just be aware of that. Be aware of your time frames. If you need to fight harder for your sponsor to extend that time frame out, do so. Because, or if you've got the resources and you're happy to give up, 3 or 4 evenings a week to kind of get things over the line, go for it. But if I turn back the time, I would have probably fought my CFO for another 3 or 4 months on top.
Sure.
It just gives you a bit of extra breathing room.
Yeah.
It was a very tight turnaround. We did it, but I think me and my team worked, something like 14 or 15 weekends during the project. So, yeah, you can do it, but be realistic about how much of your time you actually want to give up. It will absorb some of your life. So, yeah, just be aware of that. And engaging with people. Before you've even got something to launch, to go live, to even train people on, engage people with the change. Change management is one of probably the most undervalued aspects of any project. I certainly did. Andy was banging on at me about this in the beginning to get a change management person in. And I thought, no, we can do it. In the end, I had one person dedicated purely to the change management process because it was such an important topic. It saved us a lot of dramas in terms of manager adoption. Employee adoption was really, really good and really, really positive. Getting managers to change the way they did things was a whole different ball game. So, that engagement with them and giving people, even if it's just a feeling that they're contributing towards the decisions, it does grease the wheels in terms of that deployment. And we saw where we'd done a lot of work with change management. There was a very easy transition onto the new tools, and where we saw that there was a little bit of opposition to the change, that is where, and when 2 or 3 stores where we still get some very simple errors because they've just fight the change. They just didn't want to they've been something a long time, very set in their ways. So that could have been a much, much bigger issue for us if we hadn't done that whole change management process. Before the live.
Do you know, Nick, one of the things that comes out, sorry, this is completely out of left field, but it's thoughts in my head was, I think actually Decathlon were really courageous, because in some respects you tore up the rule book a little bit, because you traditional, we go with the core HR, payroll, time and attendance, do the core foundation first, but we went live with recruitment onboarding first. So, and you wanted to go with that, you wanted that sort of fast ROI, and even at the time I was thinking, this is kind of breaking the rules to some degree in terms of good practice, good methodology. But it worked. I mean, I took my hat off to you because I was slightly skeptical, but you really pushed it.
It very much fit our requirements. At the time, we didn't have anywhere to store CVs that we were receiving. People were going into a store, handing in a CV, and that manager may or may not have kept that CV. They may or may not have put it in a filing cabinet somewhere. So we had no record really of our turnover in terms of things like candidates, how many candidates we were getting applying for jobs, where they were coming from, the recruitment process that were in place at each store. You know, it's very much, we're in a position where almost each store was almost like a franchise, and they ran themselves however they felt like it.
Yes.
And we're not a franchise, so you know, we needed some top-down procedures to put in place so that everyone could follow. And you know, data is the new oil rush. You know, and companies that don't have good data are going to quickly fall behind in terms of the decision making, their kind of business decisions, their visions for the future. That's all driven by good data. And you know, we were in the swamps in terms of our data accuracy and cleanliness.
But not only did you go with recruitment onboarding and then went live with EC Payroll and Kronos in the August, I also remember, and you also then, about a month afterwards in September, we went on a holiday, I think, and then came back and you did compensation management.
Yeah.
Glutton for punishment.
Which, to be honest, is one of the biggest successes we've had. I mean, we've had positive feedback on everything else, but the remuneration process each year isn't. I mean, it's been a bit of a joke internally for years and years. It was all dealt with on Google Sheets.
Yes.
You know, probably at least 100 people each year didn't get their rise or got the wrong raise, or you know, or a manager deleted one formula out of their 50-person spreadsheet, and it was chaos. It was chaos, and it lasted from about November to February, and it was just labour intensive.
Correct.
This year, it just went like a breeze. It was absolutely amazing. Everything was automated in the background. Everything was linked to current profiles. No one could break anything. You just had to do what you wanted. We idiot-proofed our remuneration, which is, you know, it probably gave me, in terms of pure time, probably given me personally back about 3 weeks of my year. Like just in managing spreadsheets and data and updating things and training people, and you know, it's
You got a happy wife now as well to boot.
Now the project's pretty much over. Yeah, she's much happier nowadays than she was during the project.
Happy wife, happy life, mate. That's how it goes.
Yeah. So we've enjoyed every aspect. Every module has been a success. The conversation has been more so, I think, because we were settled in with the new tools. We've given it a bit of time. We gave ourselves some breathing room to re-energize. Even though conversation was a small module, it had been an intense 18 months. And now we're reaping the benefits of it. You know, we've just had two of the smoothest payrolls that I've had since we've been here in 3.5 years. I can't remember 2 payrolls ever going this smoothly with little to no errors. You know, hardly any manual payments to do afterwards or manual entries.
Right.
It's just been a delight the last couple of months.
Thanks for that, mate. That sounds like a very, very strong testimonial. Guys, again, just conscious of the time, and I think it's fair to say we're quickly approaching the top of the hour, and I'm pleased to say there's actually quite a few questions. And I think out of respect to everyone who's attended this morning, let's try and get around to answering some of those, if you wouldn't mind. But this one is, I mean, I think both of you know the answer, but I'll throw it over to you, Nick. It's a really good question, actually, from Kevin. Thanks for the question, Kevin. And just to recap, if you wouldn't mind, Nick, Kevin was just curious about the time frame, I suppose, of the project itself, and how much of that time was actually spent on payroll, assuming that, and I think I can answer this, that we started with core HR, but just timelines to give him an idea, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we signed contracts in January, and we went live with EC recruitment onboarding in the June, I believe, June or July, and then ECP was live in August. So, ECP, the payroll we was working on from day one. Obviously, we had an earlier go live date with EC and R&O, but ECP was always ongoing. and was one of the more complicated aspects, because it's where you've got the most bespoke calculations, where you've got the most interactions with different data, things coming in from different avenues. For example, with Kronos, with EC, you had the, 2 different avenues where ECP was receiving information from. So it was the most complicated aspect of the project. And even after go live, we were still sorting certain things out. We're still discovering things now that we want to tweak and we want to kind of amend and change for the future. So especially as Andy said earlier, don't view the go live date as your cliff edge. There will be more to do after. There will be more to learn about each other, about the systems, the tools, etc. But yeah, so I think 8 months day to day, let's say. So
one thing I never asked you, Nick, with your payroll experience, and I generally haven't asked this before, is we obviously had our UK packaged payroll solution, right, for ECP. How much of that do you think met your requirements broadly? How much of it met your requirements, and how much did we have to bespoke in order to make it work for you guys?
I would say probably about the magic number. So I'd say probably about 70–80% of it, we adopted as our new best practice, which is great, because we didn't have those processes in place before. We had to make some sacrifices. There were some things that we did manually that you just literally can't convert into an automated calculation, So we had to make some few small sacrifices in terms of what we did, but what we gained out of it was, was much more in terms of efficiency and accuracy. So, it was difficult, but it was enjoyable as well. I mean, I've done payroll for 20 years nearly, so I obviously like something about it. So, I found it quite enjoyable. I think some of the team probably struggled a little bit, especially when you're trying to convert, calculations off a worksheet, off a page, into testing, to then test properly. How do you test every single aspect? Do you test every single wage type report, wage type that can go into that and affect that calculation? Do you hedge your bets? Do you assume that, there's so many aspects to it. And that's where the good partnership comes into it again. Sometimes we need to lead you, and sometimes you need to lead us, and it's learning when to take the reins, who's taking the reins. That's really important. So yeah, we did it. We did it. The first 2 modules in 6 months, ECP another 2 months after. What would I have liked? I would have liked 12 months. That's what I would have, in an ideal world, chosen for myself.
Me too.
Yeah.
I was there when we started, Nick.
For a company that was perhaps already a lot more process heavy, and they had very bespoke requirements, that 8 months probably would have been quite difficult to achieve. So
the only thing about the timelines, it kept us focused, though. It really did allow that intensity and focus. I know there was a fallout, and the fallout for us too, in terms of people working extra hours and weekends and things. Of course, same thing. And the additional contingency would have been nice, because there wasn't any at all, really. But that did allow us to really focus on things and build that camaraderie. So it's a camaraderie in adversity, I think.
Yeah, and both teams were determined to hit those deadlines, and that was there was plenty of conversations that happened between both teams at the weekends, and again, it's a good indicator that we've made the right choice in the partner, because we can be dedicated, but you've got our money, so you don't have to work at the weekends. You don't have to work the evenings to get these little bits of the project done. So, it was 6 of one, half dozen the other. We all worked hard. We achieved the deadline. But yeah, if you ask me again, I would be fighting tooth and nail to get 12 months off of Alberto, not the 6 to 8 months that we had.
It wasn't for want of trying. I remember that Friday afternoon. It wasn't for want of trying, Nick. It really wasn't.
Though, Alberto. So,
speaking of timelines, we've gone over time, but that is certainly no surprise to me, to be honest. I one last question again, and I think it's quite apt to the conversation. I mean, Nick, you've achieved a huge amount over the past couple of years. I suppose, what are the next steps for HR transformation in Decathlon? And maybe once you answer that, I'll hand it back to you, Andy, maybe for some final words, and we can do a quick recap, if that's all right. And over to you, Nick, please.
Yeah, so I mean, we've got huge kind of growth plans in the UK as a company, both online and physical presence. So, you know, we want to continue to grow, and the tools are now in place to kind of help us do that. Next stage is refining a lot of the processes. You know, we transferred some from our previous way of working. We've adopted some of the best practice. Now we're in a really good position where actually we can sit back and actually think, are we doing everything as efficiently as we can?
Sure.
Can we do things better? Can we engage more with Gavdi and SAP to take the next step? You know, is there further automations we can bring in? Is there further functionality that we can adopt, which makes our lives easier? You know, one of those is the performance of goals. You know, it's another module that we want to introduce. It's currently one of the few HR topics that is dealt with outside of we call it One HR, so our SAP SuccessFactors modules. You know, so performance of goals is really something that we want to bring into the fold, and that kind of creates a full loop for an employee's life cycle in Decathlon. You know, and you always have traceability on what they've done, what they haven't done, their job history, their salary history, their training, their L&D, you know, their KPIs, performance, etc. So we want it to be a one-stop shop for every employee's piece of data. We're nearly there, but there's still a long way to go. So as Andy said earlier, it totally is a journey. We had a hard stop at the go live date in terms of you know, some people got on, some people got off the boat, but we are still on that journey, and that's why it's important to get the right partner.
Great. Thanks for that, Nick. Just, I suppose, to summarise, Andy, just from your perspective on what we've covered over the last hour and a bit, Andy, more than happy for you to maybe just do a quick recap and so forth.
Yeah, thank you, John. I mean, firstly, thank you to Nick for jumping on board and what has been a really active and lively dialogue. It always has been and probably always will be. I think that's that, you know, clearly the relationship and the partnership created between the three organisations, Decathlon, SAP and us as an organisation, was quite key to the success of the project, as was the abilities of the project team, the experts from both Decathlon and from Gavdi. And obviously looking back, even on the business case, you look at the expertise of Mike Esau, you know, in terms of helping Nick to build that business case internally to justify the cost and also explain what the ROI would be, were really quite key. I also like to thank the attendees. You know, you've joined in. There's been no slides. It's just been an active dialogue between myself and Nick. We've had the cameras on, which could be a plus or a minus depending on which way you look at it. But you know, thank you for participating, and you know, you can reach out to Nick on LinkedIn or myself or John if you want any more information. My final thoughts are what we keep talking about. I think partnership is probably one of the most overused words in our business, in the professional services business, but I think that genuinely this was a real partnership, and that partnership based on the transparency and honesty and openness that we had as three parties worked really, really well and led to the success. There were no over expectations of what was going to be delivered, and everything that we said would be delivered, whether it be through the software or the implementation services or the support afterwards, has been delivered to the letter. And hopefully what we always strive to do, John, you know, this is just go beyond what expectations in order that we can delight. And if we continue to do that, then I'm very, very happy with that. So thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Nick. I think just from my side, really would like to thank you both very, very sincerely. I know you're both terribly busy. I know this isn't an easy thing to do. As you said, it was very conversational. but very insightful. I know I found it insightful. It was definitely a very valuable session for me, from someone sitting in the outset. I imagine our audience found it valuable also. Just to remind everyone, this session this morning has been recorded. We're more than happy to share the recording of it with any of those who might require it. And also just be aware of the fact that Gavdi is an organisation try to do these sessions at least every 3 or 4 weeks. We do encourage all of you who attended this morning to register for our next event, and look forward to seeing you all on the next event. On that note, just again, huge thanks to Nick and Andy. Wish you both a very good day. Look forward to talking to you all very, very soon. And on that note, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John. See you guys.
Bye.